beneath twin moons. The snow fell in thick, silent waves over the outpost, blanketing the metallic tents and supply crates in a soft layer of white. Everything on the planet of Veros 9 seemed quieter under snowfall, the shrieking wind calmed, footsteps muffled, even voices dropped to murmurs as if not to offend the hush of winter. Commander Elias Wren stood with arms folded just beyond the perimeter light, watching the frost settle on the distant treetops. His breath fogged in the cold air, condensing against the high collar of his dark thermal jacket. The expedition had been running for 7 weeks, but Veros 9 still refused to give up its secrets. No sign of the signal. No sign of the origin species. Just endless forests, glacial cliffs, and odd biosignatures that vanished on approach. Behind him, the fire pit in the center of camp crackled to life as night settled in. The team was gathering again, scientists, engineers, scouts, all with steaming mugs and tired eyes. Elias made his way toward the circle, nodding to the crew as he passed. "Commander," Dr. Soren Ilven greeted, his usual calm face lit by firelight. "You look like you could use a drink." Elias smirked. "Only if it comes with a faster signal triangulation." The younger man laughed and passed him a mug. Elias took it, only half listening as Soren began discussing soil samples. His eyes scanned the perimeter again. Where was she? He didn't have to wonder long. From the shadows beyond the firelight emerged a tall figure. Pale fur cloaked her body like living armor, and her eyes glowed faintly in the dark, molten amber, narrowed in lazy assessment. She was unlike anyone in the camp. She wasn't human. They called her Sci-Ithal, or in expedition logs, Specialist Liaison Karel of the Vari. She was technically part of the mission, a local representative of her people, tasked with guiding the human team through the outer frost zones. But in truth, she kept her distance. Silent. Watchful. Dangerous. Until Elias showed up. Karel's arrival had been unexpected. The Vari hadn't sent delegates to human expeditions in over a decade. Most were wary, territorial. But she'd walked into their mobile HQ with a single translator bead and the bearing of royalty. Now she moved through the group without a word, claws clicking softly against the stone circle. She took her usual place at the edge of the fire, one leg folded beneath her, tail wrapped neatly around her boots. Elias had long since given up trying to ignore her. As he took his seat near the fire, Lieutenant Nessa Ray, the base's logistics officer, dropped onto the log beside him, close. Too close. "You know, I'm starting to think she only shows up when you're around," Nessa teased, nudging him with her elbow. "You've got a fan." Elias opened his mouth to reply when the low, rolling growl echoed through the circle. Karel had risen to her feet, golden eyes locked on Nessa with a look that could melt glaciers. Her fur bristled, not wildly, but enough to raise the hairs on Elias's neck. In one smooth motion, she crossed the space, wrapped her thick tail around Elias's waist, and with a strength that shocked everyone, even him, pulled him backward, straight into her lap. The fire pit flickered. Conversations stopped. Karel said nothing. Her chin rested lightly on Elias's shoulder as she stared at Nessa, unblinking. Her claws rested just above his belt. Not digging in, but not exactly harmless. Nessa blinked, looked from Karel to Elias, then laughed awkwardly. "Well, I guess I'll check the rations." She left. The silence stretched until murmured conversations picked up again. Nobody acknowledged the shift, but the atmosphere had changed. A line had been drawn. Elias tilted his head back slightly. "That really necessary?" Karel's voice was soft and gravelly, just audible over the wind. She encroached. She sat down. She meant more. Elias sighed, not entirely sure if he was annoyed or amused. But she didn't release him. If anything, her grip relaxed just enough to make it feel natural. Her fur was warm, the slow flick of her tail against his thigh oddly soothing. "Do you always claim what's yours that openly?" he asked. Karel's breath brushed his ear. "I do not share." Part 1 end. Let me know when you're ready for Part 2, Shadows in the Frost. Shadows in the Frost. Morning on Tasari Prime did not arrive with a golden sunrise or chirping birds. Instead, it crept in slowly with a pale silver haze filtered through clouded skies and flurries of snow that never seemed to stop. The wind howled through the peaks like an old warning, shaking the fabric of the expedition tents. Despite this, activity stirred in the base camp. Mark was already awake, sitting cross-legged inside his tent and rubbing the stiffness from his legs. Yesterday's scouting had left his muscles sore, but the memory of Leela's protective hold and the way her fur warmed him still lingered stronger than the cold. He hadn't said much when they returned to camp last night. Neither had she. They didn't need to. Something had changed. Outside, the camp buzzed with tension. A sighting of unknown tracks, deep and erratic, had sparked concern among the team. Not native, not mapped, and not following any scheduled patrol route. Someone or something else was on the planet. Leela crouched by the storage containers near the perimeter, sharpening her blades with practiced focus. Her golden fur bristled slightly as she paused and looked up. Without a word, she motioned for Mark to join her. "Grab your gear. We're heading out." Again. She simply nodded. This time, their route curved deeper into the uncharted western ridges, a place the Tasari avoided. Too many narrow passes, too much shifting ice, and legends of things that moved in the frost. Mark wasn't superstitious, but he'd seen the unease in the eyes of the native scouts when this direction was mentioned. As they climbed, the trail became treacherous. Jagged rocks jutted out from beneath the snow, and more than once Mark slipped, only for Leela to catch him with a silent grip. Her presence was steadying. Comforting. When they reached the ridge's edge, they crouched behind an outcropping of frost-crusted boulders. Below them, nestled between crags and veiled in a sheet of ice, was an old relay station, long abandoned, according to the planetary logs. But someone had forced the doors open recently. Light flickered inside. "What do you think?" "Poachers," Mark whispered. "Or a scavenger group. Maybe worse." They descended slowly, avoiding loose stone. As they neared, Leela signaled him to stay low. She crept forward like a shadow, her senses sharp, until she reached a ledge just above the station's entrance. Then she froze. Mark slid up beside her and followed her gaze. Inside, they saw movement. Not human. Tall and pale, the figure moved with unnatural grace. Its armor shimmered with dull blue circuitry. An Ogmere, known from legends as ancient biomechanical beings who once harvested tech from dying worlds. "What is it doing here?" Mark breathed. Leela's tail flicked with tension. "Scouting. Maybe repurposing. They shouldn't be here." Suddenly, a second figure emerged from the station, this one humanoid. Smaller. Unmasked. Female. Clearly human. Mark's heart skipped. A collaborator. Leela growled low in her throat. "We're not alone," she said. As if on cue, a burst of static crackled from Mark's wristcom, just enough noise to give them away. The Ogmere snapped its head up, eyes glowing bright like embers. It moved impossibly fast, leaping toward the ridge with terrifying precision. Leela pushed Mark behind her, drawing her blades in a blur of motion. "Run if I fall," she said, not looking back. But Mark didn't run. He stood beside her. And the shadows of the frost came alive. Beneath the frozen veil. The snow was relentless. Every step deeper into the canyon made the wind feel sharper, more sentient, as if it whispered secrets long buried under the ice. Mark followed close behind Leela, her broad, fur-covered frame moving like a shadow through the mist. Her claws gripped her rifle tighter now. The encounter with the masked intruder had left her on edge. They had secured the intruder, bound and unconscious, under a camouflage tarp behind a rock outcrop. Mark wasn't sure what she planned to do with him. He wasn't even sure if the intruder was human, the gear was advanced, unfamiliar. No identification, no insignia, just cold precision and purpose. They needed answers. "How far to the ice vault?" Mark asked, trying to keep pace. His breath curled into steam, disappearing in the pale air. "Half a click, maybe less," Leela murmured, sniffing again. "The air tastes wrong. The snow is too quiet." They reached a narrow passage carved into the base of a cliff. It looked natural at first glance, but as they got closer, Mark saw faint etchings along the stone, symbols not in any human database. The entrance was just wide enough for Leela to duck through. "What is this place?" Mark whispered. "Our oldest vault," Leela said. Built when the stars were young. Few of my kind even remember it exists. It was meant to remain hidden. Inside, the air changed. The cold was drier, ancient. Crystals glittered along the walls like frozen starlight, and strange roots protruded from the stone, pulsing faintly with a dim bioluminescence. The corridor led into a wide chamber with a raised platform at the center, surrounded by curved structures that reminded Mark of tusks or wings. Leela slowed. "Someone's been here," she said, kneeling near the platform. "Recently." Mark knelt beside her. The dust had been disturbed. Footprints. Equipment marks. And blood, a faint smear trailing toward the back of the chamber. "Look at this," Mark said, brushing snow off a half-buried panel. It was old tech. Not human. Not Tazaric either. "It's active," Leela said. He nodded. The panel blinked slowly, like a heartbeat. When he touched it, something shifted. The lights in the chamber flickered, and the air grew warmer, vibrating with low-frequency sound. Then a voice spoke. Not in any language they knew. It was melodic, layered. The sound made Mark's skull ache. "Translation system, maybe," he said. "Or a warning." Leela was already moving toward the source. Behind the platform, they found a large, spherical structure partially embedded in the ice. It pulsed gently, like it was breathing. Suddenly, the intruder's mask made sense. "He was here for this," Mark said. They knew about it. Someone knew. Leela growled. This should never have been found. There was movement behind them. Leela whirled, claws bared. But it wasn't an enemy. It was the intruder. Free. Bleeding, panting, but alive, and holding something small and metallic in his hand. "Stay back," he warned. Leela stepped forward. "You don't know what you're dealing with," she growled. "Neither do you," he said, pressing a button. The sphere behind them shuddered. Then it began to open. A thin line split across its surface, releasing a hiss of ancient air. Lights inside blinked to life, and something moved within, something tall, slender, not entirely organic. Mark stepped back, heart pounding. Leela moved in front of him instinctively. The intruder dropped the device, collapsing. "I didn't want this," he said. "They made me." Leela didn't look at him. Her eyes were locked on the opening sphere. "Mark," she said, her voice tight. "Get ready. This isn't just a vault. It's a prison." And whatever was inside, it was waking up. Echoes in the frozen vault. The first light of dawn filtered dimly through the fractured canopy above the ruins. Wind howled across the crags behind them, but within the half-buried structure Leela and Mark found a tense stillness, like the world itself was holding its breath. The air was sharp with the scent of old stone and ancient circuitry. The central chamber of the ruin opened before them like the mouth of some long-dead god, arching up in elegant curves that pulsed faintly with bioluminescent lines. Symbols danced across the walls, geometric, symmetrical, almost musical in their spacing. Mark activated a wrist beacon, casting a pale glow over the interior. Leela crouched low, sniffing the air and scanning the walls with her sharp green eyes. Her tail flicked with quiet agitation. "This is older than the wars. Older than even the records say." Mark knelt beside a console embedded in the floor. His fingers brushed over the surface, which lit under his touch like waking embers. This tech shouldn't be active after millennia, unless someone else activated it. Behind them, the snow-covered door they'd pried open creaked in the wind. They moved deeper. Further inside, they discovered a cylindrical core chamber. Vertical slabs stood in a perfect ring around a crystalline monolith, humming gently. Mark checked his readings. There was no power source. It was generating energy from something he couldn't identify. "This is what they were tracking," he muttered. "This core, it could power an entire city. Or a weapon." Leela approached the monolith cautiously. "It sings to the blood," she said in a low voice. "My ancestors called places like this the deep sleep. They say our first mothers came from vaults like this." Before Mark could ask more, movement flickered in his peripheral vision. He spun, raising his sidearm. 3 figures emerged from the opposite end of the chamber, dark coats, heavy boots, masks obscuring their faces. Their leader lowered the hood, revealing an angular, pale face tattooed with black lines. "You found it first," the woman said. "Impressive. But it's not yours to claim." Leela's growl was instant, echoing in the vault with primal fury. "You followed us." The intruders leveled their weapons. "Step aside. We need that core. Humanity has waited long enough to rise again." Mark felt Leela's arm slide in front of him protectively. He gritted his teeth. "This place doesn't belong to any of us. You activate that core without understanding it and you could bring down half the mountain." The lead woman narrowed her eyes. "That's a risk we're willing to take." Then chaos. Leela lunged before Mark could react, a blur of golden motion. Her claws slashed one of the masked intruders across the chest, sending him sprawling. Mark dove behind a slab, drawing fire away from her. Energy bolts scorched the ground where he'd stood. He activated a magnetic disruptor and tossed it across the chamber. It exploded in a burst of blue static, knocking the attackers off their feet. Leela roared and pinned the leader against the monolith, claws at her throat. "You bring war to sacred ground," she hissed. "You're protecting something that doesn't even belong to your people anymore," the woman choked out. "We all descended from the ones who slept here. We all have claim." Mark approached slowly, watching the monolith pulse brighter. "You woke something when you touched it." As if in answer, a low hum filled the chamber. The monolith began to shift, its surface fragmenting into shifting panels. Symbols lit across its face, and a voice, not spoken, but felt, rippled through the air. "Identity incomplete, compatible patterns detected, initializing bonding trial." Leela staggered back, clutching her head. Mark grabbed her before she could fall. Around them, the slabs projected holographic images, scenes of starships, destruction, hybrid beings like Leela standing in great halls of light. "It's choosing," she gasped. "It sees us." The vault began to quake. The intruders scrambled up and fled, leaving gear behind. Mark helped Leela to the floor as the monolith sank back into its base. Light streamed upward in a pillar, surrounding them. In that moment, Mark saw visions, memories not his own. A war between creators and rebels. A last sanctuary hidden beneath the ice. A gene-bound key to awakening the last hope for a dying civilization. He looked to Leela. Her eyes glowed faintly, her expression distant. "I think it bonded with you," he whispered. She didn't answer for a moment. Then slowly, her gaze focused on his. "Not just me," she said. "Us." Outside, a distant storm approached, one born not of weather, but of secrets waking in the ice. The bond had begun, and with it, the fate of more than just one world was set into motion. The thaw of two hearts. The days following the canyon encounter were a blur of snow, tension, and long treks through frozen wilderness. The intruder, a freelance biotechnician named Fennec, was now a constant presence in the camp. Though Leela had spared him, her trust had not been freely given. Mark noticed how she kept herself between Fennec and the fire, between him and the beasts, always watching. And yet, her eyes still found Mark when she thought no one noticed. Mark, for his part, had begun to see Leela in ways he hadn't before. Not just as a protector or a scout, but as a being of quiet strength. There was grace in how she moved, in how she placed meaning in silence instead of words. And sometimes, when the nights were coldest, he'd wake to find her tail curled loosely near his feet, like a quiet reassurance. It was on one such night that the warmth between them finally broke through the ice. They were camped at the edge of a wind-blasted ridge, overlooking a jagged valley below where geothermal vents spilled steam into the sky. The air was rich with minerals, but also unpredictable, perfect for the study of biological adaptation. As the others slept, Mark remained at the edge of the cliff, watching the plumes twist in the moonlight. Leela joined him without a sound, stepping beside him and folding her arms across her fur-lined chest. She didn't speak. She rarely did at first. But tonight was different. "You stopped shivering," she said, breaking the quiet. Mark glanced at her, surprised. "You noticed." Her ears flicked slightly. "You've been adapting. To the cold. To me." There was something softer in her tone. Less guarded. "You make it easy," he replied. "Well, not easy. Just worth the effort." She turned to him, eyes catching the starlight. Even after I growled at your friend. Even after I pulled you into my lap like you were mine. Mark chuckled quietly. Especially after that. They stood in silence for a moment longer before she asked, "Why do you keep choosing to be near me?" He hesitated, then answered honestly, "Because you make me feel seen. Safe. Because no one else has ever protected me the way you have. Not just from danger, but from being forgotten." Her breath caught slightly, just enough that Mark could see the flicker of emotion cross her features. And then she did something she'd never done before. She reached out and touched his face, her clawed fingers brushing his cheek like a whisper. "You belong with me," she murmured, voice like velvet over ice. "Not because I claimed you. But because you chose to stay." The next morning, everything changed. The team received a signal from the northern beacon. A group of researchers had gone missing near a volcanic crater. Their data feed had gone dead, and the last transmission mentioned seismic shifts and strange heat signatures. Without hesitation, the expedition leader assigned Leela and Mark to the search team. Fennec volunteered to accompany them, claiming his equipment could help track thermal spikes. Leela didn't trust him, but she agreed. The journey was brutal. Ash storms whipped down the slopes as they descended into the crater basin, the temperature rising even as snow still clung to the cliffs. The air was thick with sulfur, visibility low. As they neared the last known coordinates, they found the remains of a camp, tents shredded, gear half melted, the snow stained with something dark. And then they heard it, a low, pulsating thrum that vibrated in their bones. "That's not natural," Mark whispered. Fennec activated his scanner. The readings were chaotic. "There's something beneath us. Moving." Leela growled low. "We need to fall back. Now." But it was too late. The ground beneath them split open with a roar, and a massive form surged from the earth, a creature unlike any they'd studied. It was serpentine, crystalline, its body glowing with geothermal energy. And it was angry. Fennec ran. Mark stood frozen. But Leela did not move. She stepped forward, placing herself between the beast and Mark. "Run," she shouted. "Not without you," he yelled back. "Now." But he stayed. In the chaos that followed, the creature lashed out. Rocks exploded. Steam seared the air. And then Mark saw it, Leela, grabbing a flare from her belt, launching it into the creature's exposed eye. It screeched, recoiled, and in that moment, they ran together, side by side, hearts pounding in unison. They didn't stop until they reached the extraction point. Leela collapsed to her knees, breath ragged. Mark dropped beside her, gripping her hand. "You idiot," she growled. "I know," he said. "But I'm your idiot." And she laughed, a low, rich sound that melted the last wall between them. The expedition was suspended after the incident. The creature was logged and marked for future containment efforts. Fennec was reprimanded for abandoning his team. But for Mark and Leela, something new had begun. No longer defined by growls or warnings or unspoken claims, their connection had deepened into something undeniable. And as the last snow of Tessari Prime fell outside the base dome, she pulled him into her arms not out of possession, but love. Her tail curled around him. This time, it was an invitation. The end.